Hello, my name is Gabriel, and you are watching rptv News. On Tuesday, January 16th, in a continued effort to engage residents and gather feedback on the prepared 2024 budget, the City of Toronto hosted a hybrid town hall meeting, half of which was in person, the other half of which was on Zoom. In the meeting, Councillor Moyes, Councillor Malik, and Councillor Carroll explained the reasoning behind the budget's property tax hike of 10.5%. Homelessness and the need for affordable housing, an issue that greatly affects Regent Park, were among the reasons. Now let's go see how it went.
Thank you so much to everyone for joining us tonight. My name's Asma Malik. My pronouns are she, her. I'm very proud to be Toronto's Deputy Mayor and very proud to be City Councillor right here in Spadina, Fort York. And welcome to City Hall, which is in the ward. And I'm so honored to be hosting tonight's Budget Town Hall with Councillor Chris Moyes, the City Councillor for Toronto Centre and the City's Chair of the Board of Health. And we are really excited to also welcome our city's budget chief, Councillor Carroll, who's taken some time out before the first of a series of citywide telephone town halls to be with us today. So thank you so much for making that time, Shelley. I also want to acknowledge our MPP for Spadina Fort York, Chris Glover, who's here and joining us. And, you know, budgets are about priorities, and that means from top to bottom. And I also want to introduce Gary Milkowski from the Deaf Cultural Center, which is also in our ward. And I'm really proud that we were able to work together to ensure that there's ASL interpretation for this meeting. And it's also why we just have to be wherever the sound is in order to ensure that there's as much accessibility to the participation today. I also want to just begin by a personal note from my office. I really do want to acknowledge and apologize that an email went out from my office last night that did not blind copy those attending. This was, of course, a mistake from our team, and we have talked to the Information and Privacy Office right away to ensure issues like this do not take place and to also follow the recommended actions. We did recall the email and inform staff of the importance of blind copying and ensuring that we are continuing to follow up with folks who have reached out to us. So I really did want to say that right off the top. I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Moyes, who's going to start the meeting with our ancestral acknowledgements.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Malik. And again, thank you everyone for being here this evening. As mentioned, my name is Chris Moyes. I'm the Councillor of Toronto Centre, Ward 13. And, you know, this is the second time I've actually been in this room. And the last time was this time last year for the budget itself. So as mentioned, I'm going to do the land acknowledgement. So before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land we are on is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. As a Caribbean Canadian, I am committed to continually acting in solidarity with our African, Caribbean, and Black communities seeking freedom and reparative justice in light of the history and ongoing legacy of slavery that continues to impact our communities across Canada. As part of this commitment, I would also like to acknowledge that not all people came to these lands as migrants and settlers. Specifically, I wish to acknowledge that those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. In support of the City of Toronto's ongoing efforts to confront anti-Black racism, I pay tribute to those ancestors of African, Caribbean, and Black origin and descent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Moyes. And I'm going to just start off tonight going over the agenda for what we can expect for our time together. First, Budget Chief Carroll will share her thoughts and the process when creating the 2024 city budget, as well as the process going forward. This will be followed by Councillor Moyes and I sharing some of our initial thoughts. We're going to have a presentation on what is in the city's proposed 2024 budget by Anthony Ng. And then the remainder of the meeting will be dedicated to hearing your thoughts and your questions on the proposed budget. And as you know, we're all here in this room together, and we also have a number of folks who are joining us virtually as well. And we'll be working to make sure that we're equitably addressing the comments and concerns in person and online. We have sheets at the sign-in desk where you can share your views as well. You may have seen them as you were coming in. I had one in my hand. I don't have it anymore. And our teams can also read out questions if you prefer by handwriting them. And if you want to remain anonymous, of course, that is something that we absolutely respect. I will now turn it back to Councillor Moyes just to share a few of the norms about being in this space together and making sure that we have the most productive conversation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Malik. So our house rules for tonight are as follows. Please be respectful. The City of Toronto is an inclusive public organization. Be brief and limit yourself to one question or comment at a time. Racist or other forms of discriminatory, prejudicial, or hateful comments and questions will not be tolerated. At the door, there is a stack of survey clipboards and pens. Please grab a survey for notes and questions during the question period. If we do not get your question, please leave your name and contact on the survey. Our offices will get to your question after this town hall. All right, I hope that was clear as mud. I think.
And the final note, just before we turn it over to Councillor Carroll, I'm just going to do our introductions right off the top. As I mentioned, in addition to Councillor Moyes and myself, we have 3 other guests joining us. First is Anthony Ng. He's the interim executive director of the Financial Planning Division and has been busy working on the budget over the past year and a half and will be leading tonight's presentation. And joining Anthony is Mervyn Mendoza. Is it Mendoza or Mendoza? Mendoza. There we go. Senior financial planning analyst here at the city. And as mentioned, joining us at the start of our meeting is Councillor Shelley Carroll, the city's new budget chief. And Councillor Carroll is not new to this role, has previously been budget chief during the Miller era and has remained an active member of the budget committee and leading on addressing our most urgent priorities this time around and during the past many years. And turning it over to you, Shelley, to give us a rundown.
I'll move my stuff over here so that I can just sort of fly out of here. When I get the sign from Tom, my chief staff is at the back there to let me know when I need to go and join the mayor's town hall. Councillor Malik and Councillor Moyes asked me to just go over a little bit of process, a little bit of how we got to starting with the framing that the budget is in right now. And then I'm going to leave you for the walkthrough of the budget. You have the walking encyclopedia in Anthony Ng, because as financial planner, you know, everybody pays a lot of props to the CFO, but in fact, the financial planner backs up all of that work, coordinates all the analysts who do the line by line of all the divisions. And yes, despite what you read in some of the media, not all the outlets, but some, that happens before the launch that happened last week. There is a lot of examination of every budget, a lot of reductions that have already been made, and they have to pass muster with the finance department before they get to us, and then we go on from there. Now, for the process, we've been making sure that people are really clear that we've added to the process this year. There is a very prescriptive calendar to the budget process under the new provincial legislation. Every municipality, by the middle of February, every municipality in Ontario has to have a balanced operating budget and a payable and affordable capital plan for the next 10 years. That's the provincial legislation now. And in strong mayor models, they even prescribe some parts of that process. But then the municipality and that mayor in the strong mayor cities can decide some of the steps within that calendar. And so we have a new mayor who sang music to my ears in her campaign. I've been asking for about a decade now, for us to go back to what we used to do, which was to go out, we would go out at the beginning of a term of office. And early on, we used to go out every year and ask the community before we even start to bring forward a budget. What are your priorities? What do you need to see? Where are you feeling gaps? And we didn't do that for 15 years. 15 years. We haven't done it since 2007, so even a little beyond. And so the first thing she did was say, I want to have a pre-budget consultation. It was a real challenge to put together because her election being later in the summer meant that we had to really scramble to do that. We're going to do one again next year, but we'll do it a little earlier in the year so we can have even more impact on the divisions. But we did that. We did a lot of surveying. Over 10,000 people had input into the budget, and I mean meaningful input. We gave them a presentation on our financial position thus far. One of the strongest attended was at the Toronto Reference Library. I've taken feedback from that event. A lot of people said, why for the downtown core was there only one event in one location? And that is a point well taken. And so that's something that we'll be looking at. But needless to say, because there was that one location, it was jam-packed. Took a lot of feedback from that. But everywhere, across 16 meetings across the city and online, we took a lot of feedback, and really themes began to emerge. Transit, transit, transit. It needs to be more reliable. It needs to be more safe. And so that's a big frame in this budget. You need to build more affordable housing, and you need to build it faster. That shows up in the capital plan. And thankfully that shows up in the actions of all three orders of government in the last couple of months. And safety overall across the community was showing up everywhere. What's different from meeting to meeting, location to location, is the definition of how you achieve safety in a community. For some, it's approaching the determinants of health and addressing them, something that has long been something we struggle to be able to afford to do. For some, it's about the policing. For some, it's about non-policing forms of community safety. And so there's an investment in this budget in the Toronto Community Crisis Service, that new non-policing approach to mental health that's been so successful, and we're expanding. There are all those sorts of things in the budget, but so that you know before Anthony presents it, where you are in the process now is you're looking at the staff proposed budget based on their having reviewed all of the divisions, and they then had budget committee members sit down in teams, Councillor Moyson, one member, myself and another member. We sat down in 2x2s and went over every division to look at what you have so far and give staff advice, so that there's already been input from the community and input from councillors before staff propose their budget. I get to pull a little bit of rank because I'm the chair of the process. My obsession was that we get back to having a balanced budget when we launch it. That was a discipline that was hard won, and we got there when I became the budget chair. And from about 2012 on, we got away from there till we were supposed to have a balanced budget by law, but we were beginning to get into the habit as a mayor and council of having in notional amounts. There's this that we expect will come from the province at some point. There's that we expect will come from the federal government at some point. To my mind, that's a risk. That's a high risk, and the risk has shown itself. We have a structural gap that's pretty well known in the city. From the point of amalgamation, the fact that the provincial government of the day, the Harris government, for those keeping score, backed out of supporting operating of transit. We are the only city in the North American continent that runs a major transit system with no day-to-day operating support from another order of government that is predictable and ongoing. The only one, even including Canada. You'll note that during COVID, when we suddenly had lockdowns and ridership dropping, Montreal was at about the 3-week mark saying, gee, how long is this going to last? We may be in trouble on our transit system. Calgary and Edmonton with their LRTs are saying, this is kind of dicey. How long do we have to stay locked down? At about the 6-week mark. with no support from other orders of government. It took us 48 hours to be in big trouble. 48 hours and we knew we were in trouble. So we have to be careful because we don't have other forms of support predictable and ongoing. We have real financial discipline. And to me, that starts with just the operating side of it being balanced, following the legislation, following the law. That is why you see me framing the budget thusly. To get back to balance, to back out all of the COVID expenses means covering them off, whether the other orders of government came through for them or not. So there's a big bitter pill to swallow in this first year to get back to balance. That's why you see 9% for property tax and continuing the city building fund of 1.5. So it means to pull that out of the books and get to where we have a good, responsible set of books. This is a tough one-time thing of 10.5%. It's also why you see me saying that there's one thing left outstanding. We're balanced, save, and accept the fact that we are still fulfilling a massive federal responsibility. Addressing the needs of asylum seekers and refugee claimants who are coming to us through no fault of their own, terrible global crises going on. That's something that property tax was not meant to serve. We need to figure that out between ourselves and the federal government. We must figure that out. I, as budget chief, said on the day of launch that in order for this balanced budget to continue to be a balanced budget, I need to find a source of revenue for that. If the federal government doesn't come through, the motion that I will need to move is to ask staff to propose covering it with property taxes. Wrong tax pot. It's got nothing to do with redistributing wealth and addressing the needs of people coming to our country in crisis. That's a redistribution of wealth around the globe. But if we don't have the right tool to do that with, which is income tax, and we have to do it with property tax, I'll have to move that motion. That's why we're saying that. And to me, we've heard it framed in many ways, and depending on the newspaper you're reading, some call it brinksmanship and political performative pieces. I call it accounting. It's an expense that right now we're covering. Right now, they're laying out the cots in shelters all over the city so that the 5,800 people that we're helping to get their start in Canada will get fed before they go to bed, will get showered, and will have a place to sleep. We're doing it right now. This is not a project we'd like to do if only the government comes through. We're serving them with your property taxes. We are asking the federal government begin serving them with the right source of revenue. And if they don't, and you want a balanced budget and a responsible set of books, that's the motion I would have to move. That's not brinksmanship, it's accounting. That's straight accounting. And so what we hope is that Mayor Chow, the city manager and the CFO are all engaged in a conversation to try and make that very, very clear to the Minister of Finance and to the Prime Minister and to their staff. And we hope that they come through for us. And they've got about till the end of this month if we want to keep on that legislative budget schedule, which says that on February 1st, the mayor should introduce what is by then becomes the political budget, the mayor's budget, and then the budget that we vote on February 14th. So we really need to hear from them by the end of the month. I suggest they talk to each other, not yell at us, but that's just me. They need to talk to each other and they need to come up with a resolution to this because we all want to see those people get a good start. If they do, they become people that actually build our economy and contribute. We just are arguing about who should pay for that. We'll give them the start, but where should the funds come from? I submit not your property tax, your income tax. It's that simple. And on that, I leave it to Anthony to tell you what is in the budget. On the 10.5% side, what services and investments are you going to see for making that investment this year? And then I will go and help the mayor answer phone calls. Okay. Thank you, guys. You do have two new councillors. Well, they're sort of new, but you have two fairly younger councillors than myself. who are a really fantastic addition to downtown. I have to add that while I can, because it's absolutely true. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us, Shelley. And just before we get to Anthony and Mervin's presentation, Councillor Moyes and I are just going to take a few moments to give us some local grounding when it comes to this budget. And you'll have to excuse me with my notes. I want to make sure that I respect the time that we have, but also that we cover the ground that I've heard that is so important to us as we have been engaging in this budget process. So, you know, as the budget chief shared, this is a historic budget for the city of Toronto, as we're taking important steps to right the fiscal direction of the past and create a budget that works for all people in Toronto and builds a better city for all of us. And that is so critical. Because even, you know, as the Councillor Moyes mentioned, a year ago to the day, we were here in a budget town hall for the previous budget. And one thing that has been consistent and clear is that budgets convey priorities and they also convey direction. And that is what we're seeing in this budget, both those things. This budget starts the restoration process of Toronto services that have been reduced over the past 12 years of austerity budgets. And we don't need to be told that, right? We feel that in our city, and especially coming through the last several challenging years. And we cannot afford to solve 12 plus years of challenges in 1 year, but we can set a better direction. And this budget plays an important role in getting us moving in that direction. And through the preliminary budget consultations, as you heard, and I'm sure many of you, some familiar faces, I was also at the Toronto Reference Library pre-budget consultation, and I saw many of you there. You know, residents shared with us that their top concerns were that we're going to keep slipping behind when it comes to ensuring housing for all, transit, safety, and that needs to be funded and prioritized when it comes to this budget process. And the biggest issues that I have heard from residents as I was knocking on doors, you know, a year and a half ago to right now is that we are in a housing crisis. And for those of us who are looking for an affordable place to live, to imagine a future in the city, for those of us who are concerned about our unhoused neighbors, or for those who are struggling on the street, we have seen the effects of the lack of funding and the choices over many years. As shelter spaces are full, as we see more residents in our city having to encamp, and more neighbors who are unable to find housing in their budget in the city that we want to call home. And this is why Mayor Chow and the budget team have prioritized housing in this budget. And we've seen the evidence of that, placing new spending at $82 million into housing related funds. You've heard some of it, but that includes proper funding for the winter warming response plan, 450 new dedicated shelter beds for refugee claimant response, as well as investments in this incredible program that we have at the city that has been starved, the multi-tenant housing program that allows us to retain housing and keep it affordable in the city's control. Community housing agency supports and homelessness prevention programs among those as well. And unlike other levels of government, as you heard from the budget chief, our budget is not solely in the hands of our government. The provincial and federal government plays a huge role in how funding flows through the city. And one critical aspect of the federal government's funding of refugee shelter and services is that it has not been met through not even the previous commitments that we've made, the ones that are already on the books. And it is vital that the federal government honors these commitments. And I encourage everyone to contact their members of parliament to ensure that this commitment moves forward, because we know when Toronto does well, our province and our country does well. And while this budget was created in difficult financial times, getting us back on track, the staff, mayor, and us as local councillors have been working with the budget committee to ensure that we are prioritizing a no cuts budget, ensuring that the programs that we care about move forward. And I really just want to raise up, you know, it might seem like a bit of a list, but really important, because I had a chance to chat with some of you, and I know that you're joining us from right across the ward and right across our downtown. And here in Ward 10, the pieces that we're moving forward include a number of new and updated parks, such as the new park at 801 Wellington and 10 Ordnance coming to the Niagara neighborhood in winter 2025. We're also beginning the process of planning for 34 Hannah, a large parking lot in Liberty Village that's going to see a new life and bring the necessary public green space and amenities to that neighborhood. The long-awaited revitalization of David Crombie Park is budgeted in this document. Restoration of the historic Bathurst Key malting silos and the creation of a new promenade for local animation, and public and green space at 229 Richmond, right in the heart of the King and Spadina neighborhood. There will be new affordable housing and an early on program center at 150 Queens Wharf, which is going to continue to enhance and grow that neighborhood in the right direction. And the start of the John Street Corridor Streetscape Revitalization Project, restoration and preservation of the public art piece, Salmon Run on Bremner Boulevard.
Pardon me, this is one of the interpreters speaking. I'm sorry. If you're listing a whole bunch, can you please slow down? Because we have to fingerspell a lot of those. Thank you.
Yes, I'm in the interest of time, I'm rushing through it. I'm almost there, so I will be more mindful. And that's a note for all of us. So I'm glad I got to share that. The initial funding for the implementation of the Toronto Island Park Master Plan, which I know many of you have been engaged in as well. Underground utilities and public realm for the Quayside development, a new master planned neighborhood that prioritizes affordable housing, and moving the East Waterfront light rail transit forward with the next stage of design work. And the completion right here at City Hall of the residential school survivors restoration of identity project, fulfilling another commitment of ours to the Truth and Reconciliation Action Plan. And these projects will continue to improve the lives of residents in Spadina, Fort York, build upon the great work currently taking place and making our neighborhoods more livable, and moving forward in the direction that I know we share, again, of being able to imagine a future in our city and especially in our downtown neighborhoods. And with that list, I will now pass it over to Councillor Moyes with his thoughts on the budget. And then we're going to hear from Anthony and Marvin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor Malik. Again, as mentioned, my name is Chris Moyes. I'm the councillor for Ward 13, Toronto Centre. I've been a councillor for the last 14 months now, and I have to say that it's been a very trying time. 61% of social services is in Toronto Centre. We have had the largest encampment in the city for the last year. It's consumed so much of my time. From 89, we're now down to 10, thankfully. But that took a lot of work, a lot of departments of the city trying to help those that are most marginalized and in need in our community. We know that if we just remove them from the parks, they're going to go into our laneways and our empty storefronts, and it doesn't solve the problem. Also, too, the streets of Toronto Centre has been a mess. There's garbage everywhere. There's the graffiti. There are needles in the laneways. There's been a lot of problems. I spent the last few months doing the review of the Downtown East Action Plan, and has another year. It ends actually in 2024, and we're going to renew it in 2025 and increase funding for that, right? And adding a few more things to that in itself. Again, housing is a big problem. We, in the short time I've been a councillor, we have really tried to increase the housing stock in Toronto Centre, supporting those that are most in need. I can say to you that even when the mayor came on board, we've made a few announcements already, building some rapid housing across the ward. And that's something I'm very proud of. And we're now starting to see the effects of that as we speak. Speaking to the paramedic chief, and to the paramedic unions, they've said to me that they're concerned about the time, the lack of response for paramedic services in the city. Their members are getting burnt out and stressed, and this impacts, their response times. And this is at times a life and death situation, right? This afternoon, I had a meeting with the police chief. He came to my office at lunch while I was at budget all day, and expressed to me some of the stresses that his members are going through, and their response time for priority one calls is 22 to 25 minutes. So just hearing these things it's hard to hear. Yesterday, you may have seen in the news that the mayor and the budget chief and I went to Covenant House, the largest youth shelter in the country. And we were fortunate to go through the building and meet the residents that are there now. They're at full capacity, and they've had to put, I think, 40 plus cots in the gym so that they could actually make more space. And of course, that extra support being given is actually by the city. So SSHA is actually providing that funding for that. And what was even more of an eye-opener for me as a Black person in the city is that I would say 90% of the residents there are Black, and 55% of them are refugees. So it's just to put into context that the work we do here impacts people's lives directly. And as mentioned by the budget chief and deputy mayor, you know, after 12 years of at or below inflation, this has become a perfect storm for us, right? And we're at a point where either we cut services, right, like some of the things I've mentioned, or, you know, to keep it at where it's at now, just to keep it where it is, we must increase our tax, what we gonna call it? What do you call it again? To 10.5%, right? More than we'd like to. And I myself is a homeowner in the city of Toronto, right? I live in Cabbagetown, and my mortgage has to be renewed next month. So I too am impacted by some of the decisions that are made here, and you know, other pressures. So, and as a counselor, you know, I take the work that I do very seriously, and I feel that in order to make sure our garbage is picked up on time, you know, our streets are clean, you know, people feel safe, you know, these are the things that we must do. And so, again, as Councillor Carroll mentioned, you know, we were involved in various town halls, listening to the priorities of the residents and what's important to them, and we've heard loud and clear. And I think things that have resonated with me, you know, personally, also I see in those town halls as well. So I will stop there for now because Deputy Mayor Malik and Councillor Carroll covered most of my points, so I won't continue, but I know that many of you will have questions, and I'm happy to answer any and all of them. So thank you.
Sit down. Yeah. And I can do it. Yeah, sure. I just. Oh. Okay, before starting, I would like to use this moment to say special thanks to Councillor Moyes for the invite, and also Deputy Mayor Malik. Second time, this is the second time I come to the town hall meeting. And working together as a budget committee members, And more importantly, special thanks to the city's budget chair, Councillor Carroll, and also our mayor under her leadership, with all these unprecedented public engagement process that I've never seen. Pre-budget consultations in November. Now we have local town hall and a telephone town hall starting tonight and also tomorrow and also Thursday. And then there will be also 2 more days that public, you can make deputations on January 22nd and January 23rd. So my point is the budget is not done yet. Okay, so it is just like launch. We launched it last week. It is on the agenda. So it is up to the public, you can make deputation, you can touch base with your local councillor, share your feedback, comments, concern. Okay. So let me give you a little bit quick intro. I work in financial planning division of the City of Toronto, and this is my 19 years working in financial planning division. So, and I'm just like you. I'm a Torontonian. I live in Toronto. So I care about the budget because the budget is a policy document, in my view, in my opinion. The city budget reflects city council and mayor priorities. So they come with many thoughtful decisions from a policy perspective. As a city staff, we are very important and relevant because we are delegated by city council to execute the budget to achieve desired social objectives and outcomes. So over the next 20 minutes, I would like to provide you some key figures and the city priorities about this 2024 budget. And I think everyone here appreciate the challenge in this year 2024 budget. As I mentioned, last Wednesday, January 10th, city staff launched the operating budget, $17 billion in gross expenditure. It includes tax-supported programs and also rate-supported programs. When I rate-supported programs, including Toronto Water, Solid Waste Management Services, and Toronto Parking Authority. In terms of capital budget, we have a 10-year planning horizon, totaling almost $50 billion. So this budget was informed by a number of elements. A long-term financial plan presented to City Council in September 2023. The pre-budget consultation during November in 2023. So citywide, we have 16 budget consultation sections, and we have over 10,000 online response through the budget survey. In November, Ontario New Deal announcement, and finally adopted by City Council in December meeting. So these components, we put it together to guide the decision, to guide the city staff to prepare the budget accordingly. The 2024 budget includes major investment with more than $150 million, and I will get to that later. But the key things is in transit, affordable housing, shelter, and public safety. City staff proposed a 9% residential property tax increases, which is equivalent to $321 per year, based on the average assess value of your home. Plus, there will be a city building fund on top of that 1.5% for a total of 10.5%. The economy of Toronto is the largest contributor to the Canadian economy. We represent 20% of our national GDP and is an important economic hub of the world. Toronto is a commercial, distribution, and industrial center. Over the next decade, the city faced combined operating and capital fiscal pressure of $46.5 billion. Without serious attention from City Council to address it, these pressures are very likely to threaten the city's fiscal stability and our ability to maintain the level of services that the people of Toronto currently have. We have very unique local challenges. Just to name a few, growing economic inequality among the residents, worsening housing crisis, difficulty to get around within the city, aging infrastructures. But there are also other external factors beyond the city jurisdiction, like increased demand for services attributed to immigration, as well as refugee claimants, asylum seekers, high interest rate, resulting in increased cost of borrowing, rising inflation. So as reflected in this slide, city staff have prepared a 2024 combined tax and rate-supported operating budget of $17 billion in expenditure. We have known quite some time that 2024 is going to be a very challenging budget year. In fact, when all the 2024 program and agency budget submissions were collected, the final opening operating pressure becomes unprecedented, $1.776 billion. It is greater than our initial estimate of $1.5 billion that was estimated in 2023 early spring. The driving this change to our initial estimate was mainly significant added demand for the shelter system, especially as this relates to the demand for refugee claimant response, as well as additional costs associated with the service and safety investment in our transit system. So to address this pressure with this magnitude, while aiming to maintain and preserve city services, we're taking a multi-year approach to this budget. One of the key pressures that we are facing in 2024, beyond our regular inflation, growth-related pressure, is the need to manage and transition some of the cost to our property tax-based budget, which is associated with the $578 million in our sustained COVID impact that we don't have the funding anymore. And this $578 million sustained COVID impact is mainly on our TTC, the loss in the ridership, and also our growing demand in the shelter services. During the budget development, the city staff factored both the $620 million in reduction and offsets. We include New Deal funding, also as well as 9% residential property tax increases in the budget. When we while the budget mainly primarily aims to maintain and preserve the services, we also have made some critical new investment totaling $152 million in the areas valued most by the residents. During the pre-budget consultations in November, we heard a lot of residents. They would to get to know what they would like to see most support: added investment in affordable housing, shelter services, transit services, and making Toronto safer. In front of you, this donut chart or pie chart, which is the $17 billion expenditure, which I already talked about. It has rate-supported programs and also tax-supported programs. So this slide shows you the total growth expenditure and net expenditure budget for 2024, with the full length of the bar describing total spend in 2024. The yellow bars representing the amount of property tax dedicated to delivering these services. It also highlights a lighter color, which is about $600 million in the sustained COVID impact made within shelter and transit services, reflecting the added demand for shelter services and reduced transit ridership revenue. That is the only expected to return to 80% of the pre-pandemic level for TTC. As reflected in this table, we continue to spend a significant amount of city cost share social programs, with the total spend of $4.75 billion. These social programs, including, for example, Toronto Employment and Social Services, Children's Services, Toronto Shelter Support Services, Toronto Community Housing, and also long-term care homes, and Toronto Public Health. I won't speak to all the categories in this slide. The next nearly about $2.6 billion in spending for transit services, which is the next major spending category. Moving on, next is our rate program, reflecting 13% of the city total investment. Then the police and police board budget, $1.35 billion in total gross expenditure. Financing, we have $1.2 billion in capital financing support, with more than $900 million in debt servicing costs and nearly $300 million in capital from current, which is the operating funding available to support the capital budget. I would also like to point out that the corporate accounts, which is just over $1 billion, includes expense incurred on behalf of the entire organization, such as insurance, employee benefits, employee-related liabilities, etc. But there's also, we capture corporate revenues too, such as the dividends, land transfer tax. That's why you can see the budget reflects an overall net revenue in this graph. I would like to delve into this slide with the 2024 opening pressure, which is $1.8 billion. Okay. Of the total pressure, 65% of over $1.15 billion is attributable to the transit and shelter services, which includes the $578 million sustained COVID impact, as I previously mentioned, as well as additional base transit pressures and system enhancement. For example, the operations of the Line 5 and Line 6 scheduled for opening in 2024 September, service enhancement added to the transit in the fall during the 2023, and also a series of other base transit pressures. This also includes costs associated with the increased demand for our shelter services. So this 2024 budget will allow a total of 10,600 shelter beds in the system. Toronto has more shelter beds and more beds per capita than any Canadian city. This includes approximately 4,800 beds expected to be used by our refugee claimants in 2024. I'm trying to move on to the next slide. While waiting for the next slide, and I'm going to talk about the balancing action. Here we go. Yeah, the balancing action with the $1.8 billion pressure. So this slide, I would like to walk you through, the approach the city staff had taken to bring down the budget, to balance the budget. To do so, we take a multi-year approach, and which I had mentioned earlier. So there are a number of key actions, balancing actions that we undertake. First, as we always do, as part of the annual budget process, city staff will review budget submissions and identify opportunities for offsets and efficiencies and other revenue actions. Like this year, these actions total $620 million in offsets and reductions that we have identified. That's include like a regular line-by-line review. Line-by-line review could be from payroll, salaries and benefits, but it could also be for non-payroll discretionary expenditure. We look at our user fee, we look at our revenue adjustment, we look at other opportunities to for our local tests that we could leverage. In addition, this budget includes $30 million long-term financial plan actions, which was approved by City Council last year in September. This will generate to give an example, there is a new additional revenue from the graduated municipal land transfer tax on high-value homes over $3 million. So with additional benefits to be realized in the future years. Second action, we took a multi-year bridging strategies, which are designed to be temporary measures strategically to manage the pressure that we face over the next 3 years. This includes the full depletion of our remaining COVID backstop, $305 million in the reserve, and this is just this one-time draw. It will completely deserve our reserve, to help us to balance the budget for this year without any surface implication. So we all know that, keeping in mind, this bridging strategy will need to be reversed in the following year in 2025 and 2026 with a permanent funding source. Third, our balancing actions factors the $382 million in New Deal funding from the province, mostly related to transit and shelter costs. I will give you more details later on. Fourth, this budget incorporates $380 million in additional revenue generated from the property tax increase of 9%. And last, we expect and we're hoping that the federal government will come to the table to help the city to offset the costs associated with the refugee claimant response, which is $250 million. Okay, this slide is summarized from the provincial New Deal arrangement in the operating. So this is a very uplifting note I would like to highlight. This budget 2024 includes a total of $382 million in operating funding from the New Deal, $75 million for operating costs associated with Eglinton Crosstown and also Finch West LRT, $100 million to invest in subway and transit safety, recovery and sustainable operations, $200 million for base shelter and homelessness support, and also $6.9 million in operating funding for the Gardiner Expressway when the due diligence process is completed to upload to the province. So in 2025 and 2026, we expect another $410 million and $445 million respectively from the New Deal, for a total of $1.2 billion in operating funding over the 3 years. Public consultation. I mentioned at the very beginning, this is the city has undertook a lot of public consultation this year. So, and this budget, consultation initiated by the mayor and the budget chair, the city hosts a whole month engagement campaign, including online survey and various consultation sessions for residents to participate. And of course, this includes tonight town hall meeting too. Let me share with you some key findings from the November pre-budget consultation. Some of the key results from the consultation was that we received overwhelming support for increased investment in affordable housing and shelter services, with 37% of participants expressing support for investment in this area. We also heard support for increased investment in transit and police services from 13% and 10% of participants respectively. Alternatively, we have also heard from 43% of participants from the city we should decrease investment in police services. 43% of participants in the city should decrease investment in police services. 13% also felt that we should decrease parking-related service too. And lastly, 6% of participants felt that we should decrease in investment in both support of Toronto business and investment in cultures and arts. And the last takeaway is 88% of the participants, they both agree that the province and the federal government should step up and pay their fair share of funding. I mentioned about $152 million new investment. Let me give you some examples in this slide. $82 million in shelter and housing, which includes $31 million investment for the winter warming response plan. It also includes $35 million for 450 new dedicated shelter beds for refugee claimants, which contributes to the overall 10,600 beds. It includes $26 million to sustain the safety, security, well-being program at TTC to ensure a safe, reliable service responsive to customer needs. It includes $17 million to increase direct nursing hours for residents in the city long-term care homes. We also invest $2.5 million for Toronto Public Library open hours implementation plan, which will add additional hours throughout the week and also weekend at the number of locations, at the number of library branches. $13 million to expand the Toronto Community Crisis Services to be 24/7 citywide, as representing the 4th emergency services in Toronto. Consistent from the past 2 years, we also have a multi-year hiring plan for adding 52 new firefighters and also 62 new paramedics in this year 2024 budget. I already mentioned that this budget also addressed the permanent funding, address the transition of the $578 million in sustained COVID impact to the city property tax budget. So altogether, this new enhancement and base budget investment result in enhanced funding for shelter, housing, transit, and safety, all key areas we heard support for during the pre-budget consultations. Property tax, 2024 budget
Could you slow down?
2024 budget incorporates a residential property tax rate increase of 9%, which is equivalent to $321 for average home, just under a $700,000 assessed home value. The budget also reflects an increase of 4.5% for multi-residential properties, which is half of the residential rate, and 9% for industrial properties and 4.5% for commercial properties. Keeping in mind, the city also maintains property tax relief programs, including the tax increase deferral program and also the tax increase cancellation program for eligible applicants. In 2023, these two programs benefit over 8,600 households, and since 2015, we have provided more than $36 million in property tax relief. As for the Toronto Water and also the solid waste management fee increases, this is for Toronto Water, that will be $30 increases based on the average 230 cubic meters of water consumption. In terms of your garbage collection, of course, it's really based on the size of your bins. So it will range from $9 to $16 for a single family home, depends on the size. So now this is the operating component. Now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Mervyn, who is the portfolio manager within financial planning, to continue for the 10-year capital plan.
Perfect. Thank you, Anthony. Can everyone hear me? Okay, so thank you, Anthony, for walking through the operating budget. My name is Mervyn, and I'll be walking through the capital budget. The budget, the 17 billion that Anthony walked through, is really for the day-to-day operations of the city. What the capital budget focuses on is for the infrastructure investments that we make in the city, in new investments, as well as maintaining the infrastructure that we have here at the city. So the 2024 capital budget and plan for the city, the 10-year capital plan, is just shy of $50 billion at $49.8 billion. This includes $4.6 billion in spending in 2024 alone. The plan is funded through a variety of funding sources, but it aims to maximize non-debt funding strategies, such as the New Deal funding, which I'll elaborate shortly on, as well as leveraging growth-related funding tools. This capital plan also maintains our debt servicing ratio at 15%, which is a council policy. The capital plan leverages the City Building Fund to support key investments in transit and housing. It also has an enhanced climate focus that allows us to mitigate, that has climate mitigation and adaptation actions aimed at reducing 75,000 tons of CO2 emissions. Lastly, this 10-year capital plan continues to prioritize critical state of good repair. More than half of the capital plan is invested in state of good repair investments, which is an increase of $1.8 billion from the 2023 capital plan. The $49.8 billion capital plan is both tax supported and rate supported. It's 64% tax supported and 36% rate supported by our rate supported programs. That would be Toronto Water, Solid Waste, and Toronto Parking Authority. As mentioned, the 10-year capital plan is funded through a variety of funding sources, and I'll walk through some of those funding sources now. $14 billion of it is from the water rate. That's the water bill that you pay. About 28% is related to debt funding sources. 11% or $5.6 billion is related to development charges and fees that we collect from developers, while 8% or $3.8 billion is from reserve and reserve funds, which does not include the development charges and water rate or city building fund as mentioned. 7% is capital from current. This is operating funding that we put towards our capital plan. And $3.4 billion, or about 7%, is from provincial funding, which includes
New Deal funding of about $1.9 billion for the upload of the Gardner Expressway as well as the Don Valley Parkway. And lastly, there's also federal funding of about $3 billion and other funding of 3% or $1.6 billion. And where exactly is that $50 billion spent over the 10 years? $16 billion is spent towards our water infrastructure. That includes the water and sewer pipes, as well as the water treatment plants and wastewater treatment plants that we have, the maintenance of that infrastructure. About $13 billion of it goes towards transit, which is primarily the TTC, the subway, streetcars, buses, as well as towards Smart Track. About 15% or 8.5 billion goes towards housing, which helps us achieve our housing TO plan. 10% or about $5.7 billion goes towards transportation. That's the maintenance of our roads, our sidewalks, our bridges within the city. Excuse me. 8% or about $4.3 billion goes towards environment and recreation, which includes investments in parks, forestry and recreation, environment and energy, the waterfront revitalization initiatives, as well as the Toronto Region and Conservation Authority. And lastly, there are also investments in fleet, solid waste, corporate real estate, emergency services, and other services within the city. In Anthony's presentation, he talked a little bit about the great work that we've been doing with the province to achieving a new deal, and that was on the operating side. The New Deal also has about $3 billion of funding support on the capital side. And that goes into three buckets. The first is, as mentioned, $1.9 billion of New Deal funding for the upload of the Gardner and Don Valley Parkway. There's also, this helps us eliminate part of the city's SOGR backlog. There's also a commitment of $758 million for 55 new subway trains on Line 2. As you know, the Line 2 older trains need to be replaced, and the province has committed to $758 million of funding. However, that's not included in our capital plan yet, as that money is contingent on equal commitments from the federal government. There's also $342 million 3-year allocation of the Building Faster Fund, which is also based on Toronto exceeding the annual housing targets. This budget also includes a 1.5% increase to the city building fund levy, and this is approximately $53 on the residential, the average home tax bill, or about $4.42 monthly. This levy is a special levy dedicated towards transit and housing investments within the 10-year capital plan. The City Council endorsed the annual incremental increase of 1.5% until 2035. In 2024, this funding will generate $350 million in revenue, 15 million, sorry, in revenue. It has already previously supported $967 million in investments to date, and it will continue to support $5.5 billion in capital investments over the next 10 years. The 10-year capital plan makes investments in our climate mitigation and adaptation actions aimed at reducing 75,000 tons of CO2 emissions while improving resilience to climate change. Key highlights across the sectors include buildings, which is one of the largest sectors of emissions within the city. Investments in the 10-year capital plan related to buildings include renewable natural gas utilization, as well as energy retrofits and fuel switching for city-owned buildings. There are also key investments in mobility and fleet. This includes the city bike share, as well as the cycling network expansion, investments in the TTC's green bus procurement, as well as the city's fleet conversion to zero-emission vehicles, including ferry electrification. Wastewater is another sector in which we're investing that helps achieve our climate actions, our climate goals. This includes investments in the basement flooding protection program, as well as biogas landfill and gas to energy. Resilience is the last section that I'll talk about. There are key investments in the Portland's flood protection, erosion control, watershed improvements, and waterfront park development. Sorry. Lastly, as I just lost my slides there. Lastly, I want to talk about our state of good repair. This budget includes key investments in our state of good repair. Over half of our capital plan, 52% or $26 billion, is planned for capital spending in our state of good repair. This is an increase of $1.8 billion over last year's 10-year capital plan. This includes key investments in critical areas, including transit, transportation, recreation, as well as TCHC building repairs and water infrastructure. However, even with these added investments, the city's state of good repair backlog is expected to grow. And that's the chart that you see on the left. It increases from $10.6 billion in 2023 to $22.7 billion in 2033. And that's including those investments that we have in our 10-year capital plan. There's key factors driving this state of good repair backlog increase include cost escalations, update assessments, infrastructure as well as infrastructure nearing the end of its useful life. The city is committed to continuing to address the SOGR needs. Following the province's due diligence process, the Gardner and DVP will be uploaded, which allows us to reallocate some of that funding to support infrastructure renewal. There's also we are also undergoing the development of a capital prioritization framework and enhancing our capital asset management planning. Lastly, as mentioned, the City Building Fund will continue to mitigate transit and housing pressures related to our state of good repair. Overall, to summarize, we are on a path to a stable and sustainable financial future. This budget puts us on a path to a stable and sustainable financial future. It uses a multi-year approach to address our financial challenges. It reflects city-led initiatives to achieve budget reductions and offsets, while also applies New Deal funding support from the provincial government. The 2024 operating budget of $17 billion maintains core services and service levels. There are key investments in transit, shelter, and community safety. There's permanent funding towards sustained pandemic impacts, and it also expects access to federal funding programs for refugee claimant response. The 10-year capital plan of $49.8 billion prioritizes critical investments in state of good repair. It continues to enhance investments in transit and housing. It focuses on affordability and capacity to deliver, and enhances climate focus in our capital planning. And that's all about the numbers. I just want to take a moment to talk about the budget schedule. As Anthony mentioned, as previously mentioned, we had public budget consultations, which informed this budget, which we launched last week. During this week, as well as next week, there are opportunities for the public to get involved through telephone town halls, through virtual town halls, as well as in-person town halls, as we're having today. There'll also be public deputations and presentations that will happen next week, followed by a budget committee wrap-up, after which the mayor will propose her budget on February 1st, and council will approve the budget on February 14th. Again, there are many ways to get involved. We encourage all members of the public to get involved and participate through telephone town halls, as well as through the budget committee through the Toronto budget website, and also by contacting your local councillor. Thank you for allowing me to present today.
Thank you very much, Anthony and Mervyn, for your presentations and all the hard work throughout this budget process alongside the budget committee and the mayor and the budget chief. So we have not been able to resolve our sound and microphone issue, and we do want to make sure that we are using the time that we have to allow you for your questions, your comments, and to make sure that we're able to answer them as the local representatives and also with the expertise that we have in the room. So I believe our teams have handed out cue cards in order to write down the questions or comments that you may have. We'll give it a few minutes just for you to be able to do that. We also have a number of folks online. I'm sure you saw some hands go up, so it'll allow us also to gather the questions that we have online. And then we have an opportunity here between Chris and I to go through those questions and comments and make sure that they're shared out with the group here and that we're able to follow up. What we're going to do is we're going to take one of the questions that we've received in the room, then we'll take one online and just alternate that way. There is a little bit of overlap. And then we also have a number of comments just in terms of priorities that folks have shared with us. And as we've mentioned, this is going to go back, be fed back into the budget process. And as you know, Councillor Moyes is also a member of the budget committee. So we'll make sure that this gets to the budget chief. And I'll start turning it over to Councillor Moyes with the first question from in the room. Do you want to start with the first question?
Sure. All right. The first question I have is, what are Ward 13 enhancements in the budget? So again, I mentioned housing is a big piece of that. I mentioned Covenant House in my remarks, in that the city provides 10,000 plus shelter beds every night. And we don't only do that as a city, but also within the city, but also we have partner agencies who actually assist us. And Covenant House is one of those. And we have Dixon Hall in our ward and other social agencies that really help us in many ways. Transit is also a big piece of that as well. And as I've mentioned, paramedics and police, all those things are citywide, but also we as a community in Toronto Centre benefit from all of those as well. The second question I have is about to enable the building of more homes, how much more should property tax increase to cancel the 2022 development charge increase? So I know this is part of this is provincial regulations. And I know that we talked about the city not being able to collect development charges. But the province did say to us, though, they would make this whole. So whatever we were going to lose from not charging development charges, the province would actually provide that gap. That hasn't happened yet, but we'll see what happens with that. And the other question I have here is around Young Dundas Square. I just want to say that this is not coming out of this budget. I've clearly stated that this is coming from community benefits, section 37 from my ward of Toronto Centre. So it's not part of the 2024 budget, to be clear. Okay.
Do you want to take one of the ones that's online, Trevor? You want to read it out?
Sure.
I've got my glasses here.
It's okay. So
do you want to read? You want to actually just
So the first question from online, Shelley Carroll commented that this is the first year the budget was balanced. Later, she stated that the budget was contingent on federal funding. Which one is it, since the city cannot carry a deficit?
Can we ask staff to take that one?
Go ahead. Stay close by, yes.
According to the City of Toronto Act, we need to balance the budget. That is the legislative requirement because we are not allowed to run deficit. So every year we do balance the budget. Last year, over the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, we also the City of Toronto were struggling with the financial COVID budget impact pressures. But throughout the last 3 years, we saved enough backstop within our tax rate stabilization reserve. So on one hand, we are hopeful that the other levels of government will provide funding support to balance our budget. But in the event that this money is not coming forward, is not forthcoming, we still have enough money in our tax rate stabilization to offset the impact. So to illustrate the point, let's say in this year, 2023, it turned out that we do not receive any federal and provincial COVID financial support. So this year, the City of Toronto is projecting the deficit of $818 million. So for the City of Toronto to balance this funding shortfall, we plan to draw on the tax rate stabilization reserve, the money that we saved in the rainy day over the last few years in this situation. So in 2024 budget, we balanced. And we still have to deal with the COVID funding, sustained COVID impact, which I mentioned in the presentation, including shelter and transit. And we will plan to draw on the remaining COVID backstop, $305 million from our tax rate stabilization reserve in 2024 budget. This is a bridging strategy. This is the way that how we balance our budget. We need to find permanent funding source in 2025 to address this bridging strategy. So the way this strategy, with the intent is to protect and preserve the existing services without any service reduction across the city for Torontonians.
Thank you. I'll do the next one in the room. Thank you. So we'll do 2 questions from the room. So the first one, and I know that this resonates with a lot of folks. This question is, would the Toronto Shelter and Support Services budget at $638 million for 2024 and such an increase in homelessness, how is the city planning to ensure the safety of both the people using these facilities and the neighborhoods where the shelter currently exists, and one planned to be opened, especially 629 Adelaide Street West, and 20 further shelters planned for the next 10 years. And this is really critical. Right off the top, we mentioned some of the really important foundational investments that this budget is making into addressing the housing crisis, because we know that is the solution for homelessness in the long term. So programs like MURA, community housing, homelessness prevention programs, continuing to increase the number of options there are for folks who are unhoused in our city, and properly funding the shelter program so we can ensure that we're making inroads across the city, in every part of the city. We just at the Economic Development Committee approved moving forward our shelter capital plan, which is so critical to ensure that there are options for people who need shelter and space right across the city, not just concentrated in any of our neighborhoods and not just in our downtown. And we also know that shelters are not a permanent solution for our housing crisis. And they are a necessary step that we need right now when the crisis is so high. And that's why this budget takes important steps in investments in affordable housing and making sure that everyone can call a place home in the long term. And we also know that finding shelter spaces in our city is not easy, even to find those sites. That has been such a critical part of the conversation, particularly around 629 Adelaide, which I know has been so challenging. And this, and I've said it before and I will say it again, this is some of the most challenging work that we will do together. And we know that it is also necessary, and we have to work collaboratively and cooperatively as community, as city, and as local representatives to figure out the best way forward. And that means that we should all be able to count on safety. I am with you all on that. And, you know, for winter warming centers alone, city staff examined 130 locations and could only secure 4 in this city. We need to ensure shelter spaces are available in every corner of Toronto. And we've heard concerns from residents, I've heard them, which are absolutely understandable, and the safety and well-being of our communities is a top priority. And as we heard, and I will reiterate, in this budget, we do invest in community safety. First and foremost, the Toronto Community Crisis Response Program, expanding right across the city, and our community has been a pilot, but making sure that that is something that's accessible for everyone, and to allow our other emergency services to respond and do what they do best is really important. That means, you know, 52 new firefighters, 62 new paramedics, additional 911 call takers and dispatchers. And most of all in this, what I will say is that we know, and we have to demonstrate that through our actions, is that a more equal city is a safer city. That is the work that we have to continue to track forward. And this budget is about putting us in that direction. Thank you very much for this really important question. Our next question is, you know, looking, I think that there's page references here, page 19 and page 23. And this is about, you know, Toronto getting its fair share. The question is, why is Brampton and Mississauga getting money from the provincial and federal governments that we aren't? MPPs and MPs need to act. Can you talk, can you speak a little bit to some of those regional differences that we're seeing in terms of access to funds?
Yeah, I watched the news. I watched the news. The federal government give out lots of money to the city of Brampton to build housing, but they have relatively less shelters. I'm a shelter resident. And so.
Sorry, this is one of the interpreters speaking.
sorry,
We'll need
yes.
Andrew to move just a little closer. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just paraphrase. This is the source for this from the questioner is that they did see a news report on this, that Peel was getting funding for housing. And the question is, how is Peel accessing this federal funding when we know that relative to what they're receiving, Toronto is not necessarily getting its fair share? Can you speak to some of the circumstances that we're seeing?
To address this question, it's true. Toronto still expecting and hoping to receive funding from the federal government to support our shelter services, in particular for shelter for refugee claimants and asylum seekers. So, as widely communicated in the news, we are hoping to receive $250 million annual operating funding from the federal government to support our Toronto shelter system, to support our 4,800 shelter beds dedicated for refugee claimants and asylum seekers. And right now we are still this is not new to the federal government, and we've been waiting. And our senior leadership team, including the mayor's office staff, the city manager, has an ongoing discussion, for months and months. But we are still waiting for that. On your separate topic about the housing, the federal government and also provincial government, they are providing a couple new stream of funding to the city of Toronto to support our housing target of 65,000 rental units. These two funding streams include Housing Accelerator Fund, which was discussed and mentioned, approved by City Council in the December 2023 meeting. Housing Accelerator Fund, totally is about $417 million over $417 million over 4 years. So we already get the first tranche of money, about $100 and something million to support the housing projects. The second stream of federal provincial money that we got is a Building Faster Fund. And it is part of the provincial New Deal from the Ontario announced in December. And this Building Faster Fund is about $342 million over 3-year allocation. As long as Toronto exceeding the annual housing targets, on track of the housing targets, we will be able to get that kind of funding.
Well, my question is, if in case Toronto account for 20% of the economic growth, since I study economics, and Brampton and Mississauga, they did not account for 20%, and they got more money from the federal government in terms of how much resources are allocated to that. My question is about how much we work and how much we got from the federal and provincial government. If we try to say, do something like the Mississauga, they said they want to be separate from the province, then we might get more money. So use this as a bargain.
It is a very it is a very legit and very valid argument, and that is also the City of Toronto have been asking the public, and then internally in the City Hall we've been talking about the fair share. We are the engine of the economy in Ontario. We are the engine of the federal government. Our GDP, you are correct, it's about 20%. And the regular household, when they pay their tax, doesn't matter what kind of taxes, they pay their tax to the local government. City of Toronto is about 9%. But they pay the other share of the tax, 40% to provincial and the federal. But we didn't get the fair share, in return from the other levels of government.
Just wanted to add that over this past weekend, the mayor had been talking to local MPs for Toronto about making us whole and helping us with the $250 million gap that we're missing right now. The mayor has also did ask local councillors to partner with their MPs and to advocate as well directly. So I know I have done that. I know that Deputy Mayor Malik has done it, and it's something that we continue to do, and hopefully they'll make us whole sooner rather than later. Any other questions from online?
So the person comments to say, first off, wanted to say thanks for this incredibly transparent and community-focused approach to drafting the budget. It's great to see this type of listening and engagement. I was wondering, in the buckets from the presentation, what types of funding is being directed towards the 2S LGBTQ+ community in wards 10 and 13, as these wards contain most of the queer services and community spaces for the entire city's queer community?
Well, I can start. I know in the last year's budget, I was able to advocate for some permanent funding for the 519. And as Deputy Mayor Malik mentioned in her opening remarks, we have been working with the Hanlan's Point groups to help actually bring some resources to Hanlan's Point. As you know, the coastline there is being eroded as a result of the Tommy Thompson Park. And so we are working with the city parks and recreation and to bring in regards to the master plan for that. And because the island is a tri-partnership with the federal, the provincial, and the municipal governments, we are trying to put the master plan together, and so we could actually equitably divide the funding to help with the shoreline. But also too, you may know that Hanlan's Point is also the first location for Pride in Toronto. And so we're working to actually put some placards up there. I know that the Hanlan's Point folks have talked about proper washrooms. We've talked about preserving the green space there as well and putting a fence up. So there are conversations around that in particular to really enhance the area, also make it safe as well, because we've also heard that there's some safety issues on Hanlan's Point. So we have taken that back. I know Deputy Mayor Malik and her team have been very active on that file. And I did say to her and her team that our community in Toronto Centre will work with her to make sure that the concerns are addressed and we make that space all that we know that it can be. So, okay.
The next question is, the budget contemplates the need for 4,300 shelter beds for immigrants, yet Deputy Mayor Malik stated that there are 5,800 immigrants in need of shelter space. So they're just wondering what the discrepancy in the number is.
Yeah,
Do you want to speak to that?
yeah, that's true.
The opening beds, but the need is great.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
The 5,800 number is the current experience in the system. So I just listened to the budget committee based on the Toronto Shelter Support Services. This is the latest number. Yes, in the budget we include additional 4,000 and we include 4,000 and for total we have a 4,800 shelter beds, you know, for the refugee claimants and also asylum seekers. So that means it shows that the demand is even far greater than what we could, you know, deliver, you know, in our budget. In this kind of a situation, that means the refugee claimants, you know, if we now shelter system, they are using our existing shelters bed, you know, in our system, which is supposed to be dedicated for the local. So you probably understand that, you know, on the capacity for the Toronto Shelter Services, we only have 10,600 beds. So that is the challenge that the City of Toronto or the service, in terms of the service delivery that we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. And I think the number that I heard, and I hate to use numbers, just know I always get it wrong, but I think I was told about 500 refugees a month is being added to our shelter system. So again, the need is great, and it's unsustainable. Another issue that we're seeing is that the majority of the refugees who are in the shelter system, coming to the shelter system, are from the continent of Africa, right? And again, I'm going to say it here again that, you know, the experiences that the Black community is facing now compared to what the community from Ukraine, for example, have gone through is very different. And I've stated time and time again that there's an equity issue there as well. I'm also the chair of the Anti-Black Racism Committee here at the city, and I use my privilege here to talk about the inequities in the system. So I'm hoping that not only my colleagues in the city hears this, but also to other levels of government also hears this as well.
One more for city staff before we go back. Do we have more in person?
Where the questions that we had in the room, we
Answered?
Yeah, we answered. Okay. If there are more, we do have another 5 to 8 minutes.
Okay. So
did you bring up public safety?
not yet.
Is there a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, just give me 1 second. I'm just gonna this one question for staff. So is there a way to make the proposed tax increase a progressive tax with wealthier properties paying a higher tax rate? This would mean properties under $1 million, for example, could pay less tax, let's say 5%, and properties valued over $1 million would pay a higher tax rate, for example, 15%. Is there a?
Yeah. So through one of the LTFP actions, we did contemplate a graduated MLTT land transfer tax, which for high value properties, and that is implemented in this budget already. So that's for property values over 3 million have a higher rate for the land transfer tax. As to other tax policy measures, we have to go through this year and review our policies in order to see what we could do and have the sufficient consultation before further implementation.
Yeah, I think we kind of got a broad question about speaking to community safety in the budget, and Councillor Moyes.
Right. Hi there. Sorry, my name is Timothy Wilkie. I live in Lost Park. I'm just a member of the public. My first question would be, if there's organizational corruption within the Toronto Police, are we really advocating for public safety?
Sorry, I missed that first part.
Sorry, if there's police corruption, organizational and deliberate police corruption, are we advocating for public safety if we have organized crime within the Toronto Police? Take, for example, Stacey Clark. She was a sergeant passing out test results in Toronto Police. And although it's not an actual cash grab of money, essentially it's organized crime because they're trying to bid for better salaries. And she used a citizen officer in the city to cheat those results and commit that crime. And
Okay, I think we've gathered your question.
Yeah.
We just need to be mindful of the ASL interpreters
Yes.
and the captioners here. So
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
council might understand the question. Can
Just to
summarize.
recap and to summarize, it's talking about inequity and corruption within policing and how it's being addressed. So that's a police services board issue. It's not a City of Toronto proper issue. We do have, please allow me. Yes, we do fund the police. We are legally obligated to the provincial law. But we do have a management vis-a-vis the chief to deal with these issues, and we have the police services board that oversees the work of Toronto Police. So I can't speak to anything beyond that. What I can say to you though is that when it comes to public safety, it's an important issue, not only in Toronto Centre but across the city. And through town halls and through conversations with my own town halls I've had with the last year, public safety has been front and center. And I know that one of the things that I have been promoting and supporting is community police officers. We call them neighborhood officers. Thank you. And that seemed to resonate well within Toronto Centre. And I know that that's something that the police service like to extend beyond just the downtown core, because again, these are people working with community. And so we have seen the benefits of that. And I can say that as the local councillor, I've seen that the crime rate in the downtown core has lessened in the 14 months I've been here. And
why would they be asking for more money then? Because I know that the Toronto Police have a crime clearance rate, and they say that this crime clearance rate is 85%, right? Or in other words, it's a standard deviations above the norm. You see, in New York and Los Angeles, they have about a 50% crime clearance rate. And now the Toronto Police are asking for more and more money, but you know, I would counter the Toronto Police can't even fund people.
Just wanted to add that, you know, you have to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges, and the Toronto Police Service in comparison to other police services, being in New York or elsewhere in the country, is actually has less officers per capita based on population. And so that in itself is something that we have tried to, or trying to right size, because there's a lot actually of people retiring. I think in the next couple of years, expect 20% of officers to retire. And we're not actually hiring new people. So, which causes a gap on the streets of Toronto. And this is why now we're trying to actually catch up, because we have over the years haven't really filled that gap. So that's my point.
We do have some last questions and our time is running out. So yeah,
Yes, of
please make
course.
your last point.
Sorry, my point is the problem of policing and what it entails, right? We say we want to advocate for minorities and we want less violence, but you see, when we have surveillance against us, they use this information to impact our work. They use this information not just for police harassment, but for police sabotage. And it's important to understand, right? It's not just the budget of police.
Okay, let me just wrap up.
I know.
Can I just wrap up? I'll say to you that, you know, can I
Okay, cool.
I just want to add, I know the SL person there is trying to. So we've actually, one of the things, I'll make 2 points. First of all, we've actually added body cameras to every police officer in the city.
Still assaulted.
And so,
They still assaulted.
can I please answer the question? Because I've been very,
They point their body cameras down essentially so that it's off camera. Your behavior, I'm not sure. So the.
Okay, enough.
And they point it down, so it's not you, so it's very problematic.
I'll make one more point on this issue, in that one of the things that we've been showing leadership on is actually the diversity of officers being hired. A lot of Black officers, Black people from 2S LGBTQ and others. So again, the police service is starting to reflect the people that they serve, which I think is really important.
Then why did the Bruce?
Thank you.
Why did Bruce McArthur kill so many people?
Thank you, Timothy. Your point has been made.
They ignored the Muslim people who came forward as victims, and therefore only until a white man.
Yeah, you need to stop.
Came, did the Bruce McArthur case get any
Timothy,
traction?
your point has been made and we appreciate it.
The police are a criminal organization and they are a danger to this community.
Okay.
And we need to defund the police.
Part of the agreement in being here is being
I
respectful.
tried Cody Clark, he was stabbed.
Timothy, I have to ask you to please respect the time.
And no magical superhero cop saved him
Okay.
from being stabbed.
I'm gonna move on to the
No
next
cop saved
question.
that woman from being pushed into the street and having her head smashed. Yeah. I'm just letting you know.
So our final question with the time that we have,
I would say no more citizen officers.
Is-
And actually, we don't need more neighborhood officers. That's not true. They're the ones committing the crimes, actually. Constable Quinn was an officer.
Okay.
Timothy, I will have to ask you
Constable Quinn raped
to
a
leave.
nursing, student over at TMU, right? There's a list of people who've been victimized by Toronto police, and it's paid suspension.
Well,
Broke up.
well,
Okay.
well, thank you for everyone's patience. And of course, you know, everyone's points are well taken. I want to reiterate what Councillor Moy said, you know, even though we have asked and requested from the police services, you know, a line by line breakdown of their budget, we don't receive it. And that transparency is something that we should continue to insist on. And that is the kind of accountability that we absolutely do need. And we also don't dictate what the police budget looks like. So, you know, in many of our communities, neighborhood officers are important. They have a relationship with our neighborhoods and they're very crucial, but we can't direct new funding or existing funding to be allocated in that way. And there are mechanisms that we have spoken about that allow us to have that citizen oversight to the police services. And we have to continue to advocate and insist on that through the channels that we have and the choices that we make through the opportunities that we have and a budget included. That's a fair point. And I want to be able to take the merits of what was shared here. The final question, and I appreciate everyone giving us an extra moment for this, and I do think it's really important, is about arts in the city. This question is: Toronto is a leader in arts across Canada. How does the budget address support for the arts as well as public arts and arts from Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities? And that's really an important one. And we know that arts and culture makes our city really great. We have a leader in the arts community here, Halida, who runs an incredible organization that does champion the arts, especially in the Black community, and really appreciate you being here. And we know, we've seen that the private support when organizations are in difficult times, arts funding often goes first. And that is not the kind of city that we want to live in. Arts and culture is what makes this the kind of place that we want to be. And especially in our downtown communities, it's what, you know, what I always say is that if you are someone who makes a city vibrant, you contribute to the arts and culture, you should be able to afford to live here. And what we're seeing is so much of that, you know, falling apart with the affordability crisis. And what we have to be doing as a city and as a leader is addressing that. I know that there has been quite an impact with organizations, big organizations like Artscape, coming into a really challenging situation. And so what we have to be doing is ensuring that we are maintaining our arts funding. And one of the important things at the Economic Development Committee was we did demonstrate our support for arts and culture through the grants at the Toronto Arts Council. We're also working very hard to preserve the spaces and the places where arts and culture thrive in our city. 8 out of the 14 Artscape locations were in Spadina, Fort York. And on that particular item, you know, city representatives, me and my team have been meeting with a variety of organizations to protect these locations and also to make sure that we are informing the future of the sector. And that is an initiative that economic development is taking on. And that is the work that we'll continue to pursue. I will just turn it over to staff. I'm not sure if there's more that you can say about the specific numbers related to arts and culture in the budget. I do think that we'd all be interested to know in a few more detail about that.
To respond to these final questions, the City of Toronto, the biggest recipient for arts grant is Toronto Arts Council. The grant continues to be the same as 2023, which is about $24 or $25 million annual grant. In addition to that, there's also local arts service organization. There are 6 of them. And then we continue to provide the grant, arts grant in the amount about $1.8 million. It includes Arts Etobicoke, Lakeshore Arts, Scarborough Arts, Urban Arts Community Arts Council, East End Arts, and North York Arts. So as you can see, the city staff from Economic Development and Culture, you know, they try to strategically, you know, look at the not just downtown core, but on the outside downtown core, to make sure that there is an equitable distribution of the arts grant to the organization who are in need to support, you know, to support the arts and culture funding, and also to make sure that everyone in the Toronto, you know, will be able to receive this kind of arts grant, you know, on an equitable basis.
Thank you very much, and that's very helpful. And that does bring us to our time. And I just want to give a few thank yous. Thank you, first of all, to everyone who attended today in person and online. It's clear that there is a lot of passion and care in how we are spending our precious dollars in the city and what the city's path forward should be. My team and I were taking notes, and I just want to recap a little bit of what we heard as some of the key issues and some of what was shared, you know, an initial scan of the feedback forms. The importance of shelter spaces, as well as the concerns related to safety in those locations for everyone who is involved. The need for Toronto to receive its fair share from the provincial and federal governments. Absolutely, that is part of our advocacy and our work in this budget. The concern over the progressiveness of our tax rate. Questions of how safety is managed in Toronto and the role of police, as well as other safety measures. The importance of arts and culture in our city. And even from just the scan of what you had shared with us in terms of your priorities. Training and employment came up, you know, prioritizing a state of good repair, seniors care, and ensuring that we are using things like the social determinants of health to guide our city services. And we'll be sharing this feedback with the budget committee. We're very fortunate that Councillor Moise is on that committee, and Councillor Carroll was able to join us earlier today. As you mentioned, you can share those forms with us as you depart. You can also find it online, the one that we shared here at asmamalik.ca/2024 budget. You can also share your thoughts directly, as we heard, with the budget committee. They'll be hearing public deputations at all 4 community council areas in the city. So tell your friends in other parts of the city as well. Here in the downtown, the deputations will take place on Monday, January 22nd, right here at City Hall, beginning at 9:30 a.m. The next 2 days, there are also additional telephone town halls, and you can find all of that information at toronto.ca/budget. I want to again thank Anthony and Mervyn for joining us tonight, for presenting the budget, for answering our questions, to Councillor Carroll on the budget process and the path forward. I also want to give a big hand, literally and figuratively, To our ASL interpreters, Courtney and Christy, thank you so much for your care. To our captioner, Marlene, for being with us and for helping us to ensure that this opportunity was as accessible as possible. And again, want to thank you all for joining us. I'll turn it over to Councillor Moise for any final words. All right, well, there we go. And our work continues to create the best budget possible to restore our city and put us on a better path. Thank you all for being here.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please follow our social media platforms. And for more information, please visit our website.